Welcome back to Outside Views, and I want to talk about relationships today. Not the romantic kind, but the institutional ones. The ones that take generations to build and only a single careless moment to break. The ones that the United Kingdom is now desperately trying to salvage with its closest neighbors. It's been almost a decade since the decision that fractured one of the most significant political partnerships of the modern era. And what we're seeing now is a kind of awkward public courtship. It's a plea for a new lease on old relationships that, frankly, should never have been cancelled in the first place. The parade of state visits in 2025 tells you everything you need to know about the new global positioning of the UK. President Macron, President Trump, and now the German federal president Frank-Walter Steinmeier. It's an intense, almost frantic wooing of partners, a clear sign that the government is fully conscious of its isolated position, awkwardly straddling the Atlantic. And when you have to put on the ceremonial equivalent of a beautiful but hollow performance just to hold a conversation, you know you're in trouble. Major Jeremy Bushell was right to talk about the household cavalry's glinting helmets and horses standing in line as Britain's soft power. But soft power is what you use to influence friends, not what you rely on to rebuild trust with partners you alienated. It feels a lot like distraction, like polishing the silver while the foundations of the house are crumbling. And believe me, those foundations are crumbling. And I find it impossible to look at the numbers and not feel a profound sense of dismay at this self-inflicted economic wound. A major study from the National Bureau of Economic Research laid it bare at the beginning of 2025. The nation's economic output, its sheer economic strength, was anywhere from 6 to 8% lower than it would have been if things had simply stayed the same. Think about the real-world impact of that percentage. That is less money for public services, fewer innovative projects, and a general stagnation that affects millions of people. It's an incredible cost, and it keeps getting levied against the country year after year. Investment is falling, the economy is struggling under a new weight of friction, and what they need most is a clear path forward. But instead, they are forced to go backward to beg for trade. And this isn't just about abstract macroeconomic figures or stock market headlines either. It's about the soul-crushing administrative nightmare that thousands of businesses now face daily. Steffen Hoffmann, the head of Bosch in the UK, provided one of the most shocking examples of this new reality. He speaks for thousands of companies when he says that everything has become unnecessarily complicated. Before the divorce, his company had to handle roughly 40 import transactions per year. 40. That's a perfectly manageable number that allowed people to focus on engineering and innovation. And now, the number has ballooned to 10,000. So once again, from 40, no zeros behind that, to 10,000. 10,000 transactions, each requiring data submission, each requiring also time, attention, and compliance. And the company has had to create a small department of nearly a dozen people whose sole job is to manage this new, entirely avoidable tidal wave of bureaucracy. That is not productivity, that is not economic growth, that is the definition of a handbrake on a modern economy. And it extends beyond goods. Hoffmann points out that simply sending engineers across borders to help with a new model launch, the sort of seamless essential cooperation that powered the post-war European economy, is now a bureaucratic headache requiring work permits. It's an absurdity, a kind of petty protectionism that hurts everyone involved. And I have to agree with him. Simple simplifications for business are long overdue, but the very need for them is a scar that proves the damage. This is the tangible price of prioritizing political isolation over economic pragmatism. The decision to invite the German president to speak before both houses of parliament for the first time in 27 years, the last time was 1998, is quite a moment of profound symbolism. It's an acknowledgement of how far the relationship has drifted. For years, Such a visit was simply unnecessary because the channels of cooperation were so deeply embedded in the structures of the European Union. Now, the UK has to actively, publicly, and symbolically ask for the relationship to be reset. And President Steinmeier was right to speak of disappointment and misunderstanding in his address. That sentiment is real and deep on the European mainland, where the partnership was viewed not as a sober technical project, but as a matter of the heart, a guarantor of peace and security after the horrors of the 20th century. To have the country that helped rebuild democracy after 1945 abruptly leave was a shock that felt like a personal betrayal to many. And especially the British helped that in my area where I'm living. And that brought me some relatives as well. My uncle is English, my step-grandfather was Scottish, so there is a lot of link between my city as well and the British. I'm not talking about my friends in Britain. But the most critical part of this new chapter is the new UK-German Friendship Treaty. A new 27-page agreement defining areas of cooperation like defense, economy, migration, education and research. But why was a new treaty needed? Because after the split, so many areas of essential cooperation were simply unregulated, hanging in the bureaucratic ether. And the treaty is necessary. It's a practical patch over a massive hole in the relationship. It's a pragmatic admission that the country needs strong allies now more than ever, especially in the face of global instability and the threat of Russian aggression. And the inclusion of giants of German industry like Deutsche Bank, RWE, BMW and Siemens in the President's delegation underscores that this new partnership is primarily one of sheer economic and security, of necessity. What gives me a sliver of hope is that the public is finally starting to see the true picture. The data is unequivocal. Only 31% of Britons now believe leaving the EU was the right thing to do. A decisive majority of 56% say the decision was wrong. And when you narrow the focus specifically to the economy, the figures are even starker. Only 23% believe the departure has been good for business. And this growing frustration across the country is what is driving the new openness to an official rapprochement. It's a slow, painful process of national reckoning, where the rhetoric of sovereignty is finally being weighed against the reality of empty supermarket shelves and complex customs forms. The path forward, as the analysis suggests, is one of pragmatic realism. If we will see that, But the new partnership will focus on defense, security and science, aiming to reintegrate the UK into programs like Erasmus Plus for youth and research exchange, although that is something that only can happen on EU levels. There's small things that can help work on the binational level or the bilateral level, but not the big things. These are all worthy goals, but we must be honest with ourselves. This new relationship, however friendly the state visits and however eloquently the speeches are delivered, it's not a return to the strength of the past. It's a replacement, a lesser, more complicated and less ambitious project for the seamless union that was tossed aside. And the new lease on these old relationships is a lease, the British have been forced to take out because the original beautiful property was burned down. It's built on the cold foundation of what is still possible, rather than the hopeful spirit of what we can achieve together. And while I welcome the change in tone, I cannot help but feel that a lot of people are celebrating a necessary repair rather than a genuine triumph. The damage is done, and now, almost a decade later after the vote, people are only just beginning the arduous, unglamorous work of picking up the pieces. It's a long journey back from an outside view that became an outside reality.